Last summer, a most fortunate clash occurred between us, an architecture design researcher who tends to use drawing for all sorts of explorations wished to work on the Chora monastery church, and an architecture historian who was pondering on developing new approaches for the understanding of the Byzantine church building. Surprisingly, the exploration of the design researcher was strangely coherent with the approach of the architectural historian. It portrayed a solidified example of a practice that speculates the discussions and theorized proposals on the matter. Here the design researcher became a reflection of the original maker of the Byzantine church, the master builder and the artisan, triggering a reconstruction of their making process. This study will try to present this communication, the intuitive visual exploration of Chora and its theoretical definition to new scholarly approaches to Byzantine architecture. Career through the looking glass is a pursuit in the form of drawings. Here, the act of drawing is an inquiry into the intricate Byzantine spatial making and the immateriality of Chora's architectural endeavors. These inquiries articulate and form a synthetic gathering that might reclaim the representation of Byzantine spatial making. The title of the research comes from Levi Carroll's famous book, Through the Looking Glass. In the book, Alice steps into an eerie mirror in her house just to find herself at home again, but with a reversed logic. So similar to Alice, this research aims to use the act of drawing like a looking glass to create the delineations that Byzantine spatial making demands. There are several explorations in the research that correspondingly unfold the intricate abundance of the structure. We will be talking about the first four inquiries. First one is spatial wanderings. Second is cosmic flaws and marvelous marbles. Third is the pneumatic surface. And the last one is the axoglyphic narratives.
Though well known for its late Byzantine, or let's say Paleologan era extensions and decoration in the 14th century, the material evidence on the structural layers of the Catholicon of Chora monastery goes way back to the 6th century. In the historical peninsula in Istanbul, it was situated within the uninhabited areas outside the 4th century Constantinian, but within the 5th century Theodosian walls. Thus, despite being intramuros, the meaning of its name refers to the rural character of this location. It had been subject to multiple structural changes, including subsidiary additions introducing different functions during the Byzantine era. It had been repurposed into different functions during its afterlife as an Ottoman and later a Republican monument. Throughout its adventurous shifts and conversions, Chora is enwrapped with unique layers of both structural and immaterial for each temporary program. Every layer enables unprecedented associations with its articulated discrepant narratives, thus redefining this architecture's immaterial spatiality. This study focuses on the late medieval phase of Chora, following an approach that does not comply with the conventional methods of understanding the Byzantine church. In contrast with the structural clarity and plainness of the outer facades, the interiors of the Byzantine churches are far more complicated and richly decorated. This multidimensional compartmentalized character of the inner space provides various viewpoints, but avoids a clear perception of the whole interior. And this whole complexity functions together with its decoration covering all surfaces. Byzantine church cannot possibly be fully understood through Eurocentric rational analytical methods, such as simply by looking at plan and section drawings. Those methods dictate an incompatible model to assess the architecture of the Byzantine church, since it is a product of builders who did not use these tools in their design process. The common methods of architectural representation become futile in the spatiality of Chora. The project, Unveiling Chora, on the other hand, presents a series of explorations on the reconfigurations of drawings that enable us to encounter the complexity of this structure. The approach in this study suggests a change in the scale we start with for our examinations. Instead of trying to grasp the setting on a broader scale, we start from the scale of the maker's hand. This is based on the realization of the importance of the human movement and perception in shaping the medieval built environment of the Eastern Mediterranean. Relying on the assessments of the formative processes of the Byzantine church building and its decoration, the conventional methods used in its understanding, especially in 20th century scholarship, created more obstacles to be deciphered rather than reaching an achievement in theorizing Byzantine architecture.
One of the striking memories of visiting Cairo as a child and later as an architecture student was the eye-level marble riveted surface enwrapping all the interior in contrast to the sacred narrative depicted by the mosaics and frescoes hovering above. The aesthetics of the pure material and the spatial poetics of texture of a natural element, such as Proconnesian marble used in architectural space, seemed quite contemporary and contrasted with the expectations of a historical monument. The first inquiry instinctively starts with the idea of extending the marble surface. The aim of it is to create an endless, consistent marble riveted surface where all the niches and corners of the interior unfold. The surface mimics a particular visit to Chora that starts from right to left at the southern wall of Naos and moves anticlockwise. It passes by the mosaic of Virgin de Hodegetria, the Mimbar, the apse and the mihrab niche embedded in it, and visits the mosaic of Christ and finally leaves Naos by its main entrance. Passing under the mosaic of Christ Pantocrator, the visit continues at the inner narthex, first towards the dome with the mosaic of the genealogy of Mary, then moves east towards the dome with the genealogy of Christ, with Christ the Assis beneath, and ends with entering Naos once more under Chimesis, death of the Virgin scene at its western wall. The spatial wandering of this visit embeds the section and elevation sets of the structure into a collage where the multidimensional, compartmentalized character of the inner space is reconfigured. The drawing collages orthographic sets with a reproposed angle and adjusts them to the viewpoint of the spectator as they wander. Now Chora unveils itself as a single wall with strange spatial implications. It suggests an architecture of accumulated fragments and multifaceted surfaces, a synchronous gathering of its interior and exterior. The second act is about the almost psychedelic, inkblot-like visuals of the marble surfaces. This inquiry is inlaid on the reconfiguration of the first act and explores the spatiality of the multicolored marble riveted surfaces of the structure. Similar to the builders of Chora, layering and configuring the veneer sets as they pave the plates, the drawing traces the veins of the marbles. Enacting their building maneuvers in the form of hand drawing is a mimicry, a reflection with a means to exceed being a sole visitor in the 21st century of a monument. Ironically, the visual data of this inquiry is collected from archival materials, since Cairo Museum is under restoration for years now and closed to the public and expected to have interior adaptations, as it has been recently reconverted into a mosque in 2019. Therefore, drawing the veneer sets by hand is both an inconspicuous and magical act. At first glance, it's an exploration of space making, yet it is trespassing disguised in the form of lines and shadings. It transfers the dressed woman to a no trespasser zone by enabling her to perform a tactile, spatial drawing, similar to Alice walking into the mirror to transfer to the reversed logic of her hell. Drawing inquiry aims to decipher the complexity of the interior upper surface by an upside-down axonometric projection. It is an exploded axonometric delineation that dissects the historical layers of Chora. The interstices between its fragments alter. The marbled surfaces of Naos and the inner narthex bind the two fragments. The spatial narrative of the inner narthex continues at the outer narthex, and Chora unfolds towards its paraklesion. The upside-down axonometric delineation of the structure emerges only at the places where visitors are allowed. The rest is excluded from this inquiry. The projection of the upper interior then creates a wheel-like surface, enfolded in sometimes inflated cover, that hovers above the spatial wanderings of the marble surface. The pneumatic surface resembles the compactness of the Byzantine spatiality to work further on its narratives. So the final inquiry works on this surface to build the spatial narrative. Here the depictions of decoration, mosaics and frescoes are collaged and merged specific to their locations on the surface, along with the erosions and disruptions of the missing layers. Chora is enwrapped with unique layers of both structural and immaterial for each temporary program. Every layer enables unprecedented associations with its articulated, discrepant narratives, thus redefining this architecture's immaterial spatiality. This exploration aims to create a consistent, undetached layer of narrative without focusing on the enchanting scenes of liturgical compositions. The compact mass of the Byzantine church is composed of various elements present in the vocabulary of the Byzantine master builder. The builder makes flexible choices during the construction process, following various factors such as the specific desires of the patron, available material, or the compatibility of the architectural components to the designated decorative program, simultaneously with the construction. The making process is alive and unbounded from an initial project plan. The Byzantine builder has a vocabulary of forms for the roofing system that he can choose from as well, including domes and various wall types. Although the outcome of this making has a common language that makes the Byzantine church easily identifiable, no specific example is similar to another, since the variations in chosen details are endless. So these inquiries on the pneumatic surface dissect the unity of the roofing system into its components and examine the relations within their decoration. This portrays the integration of decoration into architecture and vividly presents how this process is used in the creation of the sacred connotations of the space. It might be considered as a practice for the understanding of hierotopic creation at the building level. And this is the final image, where all the inquiries are gathered to form what might Byzantine spatial making resembles. Here the abundance of details and articulated explorations are juxtaposed to create a choreography of lines and textures that is divergent from a static representation of historical architecture that overlooks its contemporary user and its past maker.
One of the highlights of my life has been to go to this building near Istanbul. Can you tell me in simple words what you think your drawing does that I don't see in my experience of the building? In simple, like, what did you try to do? What is your question? Like, I don't understand why you turn it upside down. I don't understand why it's painted pink. It's all gold. Can you tell me a bit about what, like, in simple terms? I'm not an expert in Byzantine architecture, and I'm fascinated by your drawing. Don't take me wrong, it's beautiful drawing. But maybe you have a question, maybe you can help me to understand what you're trying to do with your drawing in relation to this amazing building, which is one of the highlights of Byzantine architecture.
Should I answer it, Bilge? Yeah. So it's not really, the drawing doesn't aim really what the cahier resembles, but it's more about its spatial making, which is a little bit different than how it appears, but it's more about what we could see about its making. So that's why it's a little bit dissected, it's a little bit turned over, and with every inquiry has a different kind of question towards its making and our experience. So although it's the inner narthex and outer narthex is full of mosaics and the Paraklesion is full of frescoes, the main part of the building is it doesn't have the mosaics now. They are not there. And the pink comes from the mortar. Is it mortar? Do I say it right? Comes from there, the apparent color of Byzantine church. So when you have the material that resembles that, so that's why the erosion, the disrupted parts are all pink, and we have the mosaics with the same color because I use them through collage with the exact places. So when you look at them, when you take the whole upper ceiling upside down, actually what you see is somehow similar to this, which is not really the same as you go in and you have that experience of full of golden images that you have. That's the whole reason, actually, in a way. So it shouldn't resemble the same thing. It shouldn't do that. Yeah, it's one of my favorites in like, it's my favorite building too. So I understand your concern as well.
There's another question that's coming from the back of the room, so he has to.
Hi, Bihter.
Okay.
Just a quick question, actually, to follow up a little bit. I'm wondering if you and your colleague are thinking about extending the drawing spatial analytic that you started to do with the Kariye, church to other Byzantine monuments in Istanbul. I'm thinking in particular, of course, about San Sofia as one, the Hagia Sophia, the Hagia Erin in particular, although it doesn't have the marbles anymore, or Saint Sergius and Bacchus. I'm wondering about how you might start to use this analytic as a way to look at Byzantine buildings, perhaps some that are even radically so transformed, from their first, planning and implementation. I'm just curious if you see a kind of possibility of this as a continuum of analysis. Thank you.
Yeah, that's what we were talking about as well. So this is like this is a work that I like. It doesn't really look like all the things that I've done before. So it's quite experimental in that way. And what we do is we have these discussions with Bilge, and so we were thinking about looking other places, but not really having it specifically to the Byzantine ones, but it's more about the spatial making around here. So it's not really right. I'm just saying, it's not really the terms that I'm comfortable with. So it's like we could look at other structures that might have this kind of making as well. That's the question that I was going to ask to you yesterday when you are looking at all these structures from here as well. So what I was doing when I was drawing this, that I realized that certain kind of making, like as we talked with Bilge as well. So my knowledge in architecture history is just limited to my undergrad degree. So when I started working on this one, I realized that all the things that I'm looking at in design process and the things that I'm questioning are actually inherent in the ways of us making places here. So that's what I wanted to ask you as well. Did you discover that kind of making as you were looking at all these plans around Istanbul as well? So that's what I discovered, and I wanted to work on it more. So it's a comment and question.
It was a bit premature of me to go back to my seat at the end of the room, but I love the question, and I'd love to talk with you more about it. But for me, I think the transition will be sectional, actually, to what you're doing, in a way, is to look at the section of the building. I've been looking at the plan and the elevation in particular, and so I think looking more deeply in a way that's more contingent and parallel to miniatures actually would be the way for me to sort of start to explore that. But I love the drawings, just wanted to say that also, some really, really beautiful expressions of the space of Chora.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's a final comment by Alberto.
Phyllis, as a historian, I worry a little because I know that in the Byzantine tradition, as much as in the medieval Western tradition, nobody thought of architecture spatially. This idea of spatial analysis is something that comes from modernity, and that we look retrospectively to these artifacts and we impose on them. So, you know, that's something that I think one has to think about. The people that made these buildings were thinking in terms of ritual, were thinking in terms of the narratives that are actually portrayed in the mosaic and in the iconography. And the experience is always spatio-temporal. It's never purely projective or spatial or either in section or in plan or in elevation. No one thought in those terms. So it's something that I always worry about. What are we discovering when we do this? Are we fooling ourselves, or are we really seeing something that they didn't see? Anyhow, it's a question, because really these buildings were not conceived in those terms.
Yeah. Well, maybe we will have a different answers to this question, Bihter and me. Well, I'm kind of very traditional in my thinking, and I'm trying to think out of the box. But what Bihter did is, absolutely not curated by any historical knowledge. Like, I was thinking about how the importance of human movement in shaping not exactly the interior, but the exterior of the churches, or more about urbanism, like for the past 2 years. And then I saw what she was doing, and I believe this didn't bring us to a conclusion, but just like an initiation of some trials to look at things from a much closer detail. And so especially, something clicked to me when I saw her, struggling with how she tries to bring the surfaces and architecture together with decoration. It might be or might not be, successful in a scientific sense, but I believe it's, in an attempt of understanding, it had some value to me. But especially this, when I walk around the church in this compact form, the amount of surfaces, and so it's a box. But when we move in with this compartmentalized character of the space, that, maybe even scientifically, that comparing the amount of surface we have on the outside and inside, there's a really, really great contrast. And when she started to open up this, then it kind of made it more visual for me. But of course, this is a trial, and maybe, for example, if it was a curated trial, maybe I would want to do something else with Middle Byzantine churches rather than this very complicated late Byzantine era example. But for me, it wasn't a very exciting process, and for the future, maybe not this exact technique, maybe something completely else, but starting from detail, more and more trials. And I think anything that would bring us to a conclusion will be the abundance of trials. Like, none of these will give us a final answer yet, but how to look, like when we go there, how to look, how to walk around it, where to look, and this three-dimensional experience, and feeling of scale when we were there. So this was, in a way, that kind of an exciting process for me. But yes, on my side, I'm although trying to think out of the box, I'm on the conventional side. So this is not a result, but an attempt, and it kind of, let me just say this, and I'm really, really scared to say this, but for some of the articles I've read about hierotropy of Alexei Vido, well, when I watched Bihter work, they started to make more sense to me. But maybe it is because of what I wanted to see rather than what I actually saw. But yes, sorry for taking this long. I know I sound very confused, but this is the beginning of things. So sorry.
Yeah, I think I have also an answer to that. That might be a bit different than like the perspective could be different. So there's a reason that I wanted to work on Chora in these 2 years, because there's this change on it is actually like the drawing refers to what Jane Randall calls as critically situated practices, which is an actual, like I'm lucky that we are showing our work after Penelope, so it's like so I could say that it's a kind of a feminist storytelling where it's more about minor architecture that doesn't really solve and resolve things, but it's more about having more gatherings of things that might actually have more little bit of things, but not saying like clear and resulting answers. So it's more about that, and how this work is positioned is also there. So probably it's not really the thing that architecture historians have as methodology, but I think in architecture design we use these kind of methodologies to position ourselves with our making, and it's a critical place that we are looking from.
Thank you, but we'll have to leave it at that. Alberto, thank you. I'm just going to say, and just so you can see me today, again, we are so embarrassed by our bureaucracy, and we're sorry that you're not here with us. But thank you for joining.
Maybe next year my visa will arrive, so I can come next year.
It will come as soon as you.